If you have OSHA compliance questions or concerns, Pike Group's got you covered.
The environmental issues facing the state of Florida are important to everyone. If you live, work, and play in the state of Florida, you should be concerned about water quality. Please contact your representatives and get involved today to help clean up Florida's water problem. It's imperative that we solve these issues sooner than later. Thank you. Let's get into the red tide conversation. Let's talk about water in Tampa Bay. Let's talk about water in the state of Florida. I got Captain Dustin Pack here of Tampa Bay Waterkeeper. I've seen some of his videos going on social media, so I've decided to bring him in today to discuss what the situation is. Definitely happy to have you here today. Tell us about yourself and your connection to Tampa Bay and the state of Florida.
So I'm a fly fishing guide in Tampa Bay. I've lived in Florida my whole life. Born in Fort Myers, moved here when I was 4 in the Tampa Bay area. Over time, got into guiding fly fishing here, and then evolved into doing a lot of the environmental side. Just because seeing the state of Tampa, the estuary, the rivers, really made me want to get involved with Waterkeeper or any kind of entity that would help preserve the estuary. So over time, that evolved kind of a conservationist that happens to be a fly fishing guide. And being that this is my home waters, just took the time to really, push the narrative that we need to, help this estuary and prevent it from being polluted like it has been.
Right. What is the mission of Tampa Bay Waterkeeper?
So we're a 501(c)(3). We're a board of volunteers that pretty much whoever violates the Clean Water Act is who we quote unquote go after. That's who we, if you violate the Clean Water Act, we have a board of lawyers. We have an environmental attorney on our board, Justin Bloom, who's very good at what he does. So that's pretty much our main role is people that violate the Clean Water Act.
Tell me, what has shocked you the most about the red tide situation in Tampa Bay, and how's it affected you?
So the sheer amount of dead marine life that we've seen is what was overwhelming.
Absolutely.
So we have, red tides, some years on the beaches, tide or wind direction will blow them into the beaches because typically, a red tide happens offshore, it can be blown in. In Tampa, we don't really have a red tide that gets past the skyway for the most part.
And the skyway is more or less in the lower part of the bay.
Correct, yeah, so it's closer to the beaches.
Right.
So with wind direction and stuff, it usually gets there. There'll be spots of small, red tide come August or September in any given year in Tampa Bay, but nothing major. So for this red tide that we saw, it started in Tampa Bay. The fish kill started in Tampa Bay early.
Right.
So we were seeing dead fish the early part of June, second week in June. We were reporting dead fish, and then over time it got worse and worse and worse. So just the timeline of it and the amount of death that we saw is what was really attention grabbing.
And you were seeing it in more unusual places too.
Oh, for sure, yeah. So we first started, where I started spotting dead fish was in the shipping channel all the way up from like south of MacDill, kind of near Piney Point, the shipping channel all the way up to Tampa Bay, and then all along Bayshore. Bayshore was when I first started documenting dead fish. I think it was June 14th. Mm-hmm. Hundreds of dead catfish, trout, stuff like that. And then at that point, we kind of knew that we were at the very beginning of not the very beginning of the fish kill, mm-hmm. Which was going to be a big problem.
So you're seeing it up there in Old Hillsborough Bay, which is unusual to
Correct.
see it that far up.
Yeah, it's unusual to see the amount that we saw. You
Right.
know, like I said, and for the time, we don't see dead fish in June in Tampa, especially up that far.
Right.
Typically.
Gotcha. Can you give us a quick rundown of the story of Piney Point phosphate plant and the associated wastewater holding stacks that are found in other places around the bay?
Right, so you can go online and find the history of everything that happened with Piney Point and its development in the 60s and then how it changed hands multiple times over the decades. I can't get into it too much because currently Tampa Bay Waterkeeper has a lawsuit against what happened at Piney Point, against the state, against FDEP, against Port Manatee, and multiple entities for the failure of what happened there. But it's so we have phosphogypsum stacks all around the state. It had a wastewater stack at Piney Point that had multiple breaches over multiple decades.
A known problem.
A known problem. There's a paper trail you can Google it and you can find the paper trail. Multiple times it had leaks. It was a known problem. And then, so then over time, that problem got worse and worse and worse. And then come the end of March, the wall was breached on the south side of the stack. It started leaking, and for an emergency discharge, because they were afraid that that the wall was going to be breached and it was going to flood the local town. So to prevent that, they did an emergency discharge of 215 million gallons of high nutrient wastewater into Tampa Bay, and that was the end of March.
215 million gallons.
That's what they're telling us, is 215 million gallons. Their original estimate
That's a lot of water.
Yeah,
that's
their original
a lot of water.
estimate was around like 450 million, and then they told us that they were able to stop it at 215 million gallons. So
yeah,
215 is the number that we have.
Well, we're fortunate we got half of what could have been, but even still, that's a tremendous amount of wastewater that entered the Tampa Bay estuary, and the damage that we've seen has just been tremendous.
Yeah, the nutrient load that it discharged is because that's what an algae bloom or red tide is. It's high nutrients. It's an algae that feeds off of nutrients. It's a plant. So you fertilize it, and then which is pretty much what we did with the discharges. It's going to exacerbate the issue and create what we see today and what we've seen in the past couple months.
Essentially pouring gasoline on a fire.
Pretty much. Yep, exactly. Some people, or red tide is quote unquote naturally occurring, and it does. As far as I know, it's not naturally occurring to this extent inside of the bay. So like you said, you have a fire and you put gas. If a forest fire is natural, start putting gas on it, then it becomes not natural anymore.
Absolutely, yeah. Gets hotter, flares up.
Exactly.
The problem increases. Do you think most people are aware of our problems or that these phosphogypsum stacks still exist in other places immediately around Tampa Bay?
I think they have. Most people, I don't really know if most people do. I think a lot more people know in the past 6 months than did before. Obviously, it takes a disaster to, unfortunately, but that's why we do, interviews like this. We go on any news outlet that wants to talk to us about the issue. We talk to them, any reporter, any newspaper, just because education is everything. If you don't know what's happening and you're not faced with it, or you're not on the water, you don't see it constantly, and I make the reference to people that, work they live at home and they drive to their office and then they go back home. Those people, as of right now, maybe aren't as affected as a fishing guide or as a hotel on the water or as a restaurant on the water. But when those people are affected, so we're trying to get ahead of it, because once those people are affected by it, that aren't on the water every day or aren't on the water hardly at all during the year, when those people are affected, then I don't know if we can control it anymore, because that means that people aren't, whatever that means. If somebody's driving from their house to their office and back, and they're affected by water quality issues, then we would have a gigantic problem.
So who do you think holds most of the blame for the situation that we're in right now? Where does the mismanagement lie with?
I believe that's multiple entities are to blame. Like I said, with our lawsuit, we named FDEP, the state of Florida, HRK Holdings, Port Manatee. They all have pretty much a hand in it, and they all have had control over this stack for many decades. That should have been either shut down, cleaned up 20 years ago, that it wasn't. But there's multiple hands in this that failed.
How do we be sure that this never happens again?
Talking about it and making everybody aware of what's happening and what has happened here. Public outcry is a big thing. Not saying red tide is naturally, red tide is naturally occurring. People reiterate that over and over and over. But what we saw is not even close to natural. I mean, not even close.
Absolutely, I agree.
So people saying that it's naturally occurring, that hurts, because that's not true. So spreading that, getting more restraints, legislation is the long term. More restraints on phosphate mining, bigger fines for discharges or anything that happens, because a lot of times the fines for doing, history-wise, the fines for these problems was easier to deal with for a lot of these companies than fixing the problem in the first place.
Right.
So bigger fines, heftier fines, you can go on and on about things that need to change, but legislation in the long run is what we need to attack.
Do you think our current representatives care about the water quality of Florida?
I do, to an extent. I think they want to care. I think that a lot of entities are in their ear telling them what's going on, and some of those entities may not be telling them the truth. I think a lot of so what we have in, whether they care or they don't care, they have to, because the lifeblood of Florida is our water. That's why everybody comes down here. Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater, the beaches, Sarasota, the waterway, the estuary, the beaches, the fishing, the scuba diving. That's why people come here. This needs to be whether you're left, right, it's a right down the middle situation.
It affects everything.
Exactly. You have to be pro water in this state, because not everybody comes here to go to Disney World. So if you're not for the water, in 5 years, if we have this occurring every year, what we just had this year, I don't know how much life the Bay would have anymore. You can't, 1,600 tons as we sit today of dead marine life just inside of Tampa Bay. Now Sarasota's getting hit, beaches are getting hit. You can't have that every single year and have a clean, healthy estuary. It's just not possible. So it needs to be an issue that needs to be addressed by every politician, every city leader, every representative, because if we don't have water, then we don't have anything.
Well, Captain Dustin, I really appreciate you coming in today and spreading this information for our viewers. How can people get involved with Tampa Bay Waterkeeper?
So our website is tampabaywaterkeeper.org. You can go there. Becoming a member helps immensely for us. Volunteering helps immensely for us. Like I said, we're a board of volunteers that do this, all for the sake of trying to help our environment and our estuary. Becoming a member, like I said, helps a lot. So if you go to tampabaywaterkeeper.org, we have all of the information about our lawsuit, all of our information about previous lawsuits that we had, because it's not just about Piney Point. We have multiple problems with our estuary, multiple leaks with infrastructure problems, runoffs and stuff like that. All of that information is there. But yeah, becoming a member, talking about what we're talking about today is huge, and keeping the pedal down for talking about 1,600 tons of dead fish inside of Tampa Bay is key. So, come November, December, when the waterway cleans up and the water temps go down, this is still a problem. A lot of those discharges inside of Piney Point are still there. So just because we don't have 1,600 tons of dead fish at the moment doesn't mean it's not a problem.
Absolutely.
So everybody that had the passion and the drive to talk about it and want to change it a month ago, 2 months ago, that has to continue to happen. Otherwise, it's easy for the entities that are causing these problems to sweep them right under the rug and act like nothing happened. So becoming a member, talking about this is key for sure. For the long run, just keep driving it home that we have to have water quality, good water quality inside of Tampa Bay and our surrounding Sarasota, Clearwater, everywhere. This is a problem that stretches a long way. South Florida, Mosquito Lagoon on the East Coast. A lot of estuaries, a lot of bodies of water have problems that need to be fixed in Florida for people to keep coming here.
There's a lot of work to be done. Once again, thank you for this information.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks for coming in.
Appreciate having me.
Big shout out to our sponsors, St. Pete Fishing Outfitters, Tampa Fishing Outfitters, Tarpon Fishing Outfitters, and the Pike Consulting Group that make these videos possible so we can get this great information to you, the viewer. Be sure you subscribe to Head First Fishing, and I'll see you later.